أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
Surah 36, Yasin, Meccan period. Title: The two opening letters constitute the surah's title. Period of revelation. The tenor of the surah indicates that it must have been revealed towards the end of the Meccan period's middle phase. Alternatively, it would have been revealed during the last phase of the Meccan period of the Prophet's mission. Subject matter and themes. The purport of the surah is to warn the unbelieving Quraysh of the grave consequences for their refusal to believe in the Prophet, peace be upon him, and their recourse to oppressive measures, mockery, and lampooning in opposing the Prophet's mission. The dominant mood that characterizes the surah is that of warning. However, alongside these warnings, the message is also explicated with the help of argumentation. A. Arguments in support of monotheism are drawn from natural phenomena and common sense. B. Arguments in support of the hereafter are also drawn from natural phenomena, common sense, and man's very own being. C. Arguments are also proffered for the veracity of Muhammad's messengership, peace be upon him. They consist of highlighting A. The selflessness with which the Prophet, peace be upon him, endured hardships in the cause of his message. B. The perfectly sound and reasonable character of his teachings, and C. The fact that acceptance of these teachings was conducive to mankind's good. Alongside this argumentation, the discourse is punctuated by forceful notes of reproach and warning with a view to jolting the unbelievers from their stupor. This also serves to influence the hearts and minds of those who have even an iota of ability to accept the truth. Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Abu Dawud, Nasai, Ibn Majah, and Tabarani cite the Prophet's statement on the authority of Maqil ibn Yasar that Surah Yasin represents the heart of the Quran. Surah Al-Fatiha is called al-Quran because it encapsulates all the essential teachings of the Quran. Surah Yasin has been likened to the Quran's throbbing heart because it forcefully expounds its message. A study of this surah shatters spiritual stolidity, arousing and activating man's soul. It is again on the authority of the same Maqil ibn Yasar that the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "Recite Surah Yasin when one of you dies." This because the surah refreshes all the articles of Islamic belief and prompts one to think of what will happen in the hereafter. This will enable the dying person to realize what stages he will pass through when his term of worldly life ends. In order to achieve this purpose, it seems appropriate that this surah should be recited on this occasion, along with its translation for the benefit of those who are not conversant with Arabic.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim.
In the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most compassionate.
Yasin.
Yasin.
1. Ibn Abbas, Ikrimah, Dahak, Hassan Basri and Sufyan bin Uyayna have opined that it means, O man, or O person. Some other commentators have regarded it as an abbreviation of Ya Saeed as well, which, according to this interpretation, would be an address to the Prophet, peace be upon him.
وَالْقُرْآنِ الْحَكِيمِ.
By the wise Quran.
إِنَّكَ لَمِنَ الْمُرْسَلِينَ.
You are truly among the messengers.
2. To begin a discourse like this does not mean that the Prophet, peace be upon him, God forbid, had some doubt about his prophethood, and Allah had to say this in order to reassure him of it. But the reason is that the disbelieving Quraysh at that time were most vehemently refusing to believe in his prophethood. Therefore, Allah at the very beginning of the discourse has said, "You are indeed one of the messengers," which implies that the people who deny your prophethood are misled and mistaken. To further confirm the same, an oath has been taken by the Quran, and the word, wise, has been used as an epithet of the Quran, which means this: an obvious proof of your being a prophet is this Quran, which is full of wisdom. This itself testifies that the person who is presenting such wise revelations is most surely a messenger of God. No man has the power to compose such revelations. The people who know Muhammad, peace be upon him, can never be involved in the misunderstanding that he is himself forging these discourses, or reciting them after having learned them from another man. For further explanation, see Surah Yunus, Ayat 16-17, 37-39, Surah Bani Israel, Ayat 88, Surah An-Nam, Ayat 75, Surah Al-Qasas, Ayats 44-46, 85-87, Surah Al-Ankabut, Ayats 49-51, Surah Ar-Rum, Ayats 1-5, and the relevant ends.
على صراط مستقيم
On a straight way,
تنزيل العزيز الرحيم.
and this Quran is a revelation from the Most Mighty, the Most Compassionate.
3. Here, two of the attributes of the sender of the Quran have been mentioned. First, that he is almighty. Second, that he is all-merciful. The first attribute is meant to impress the reality that the Quran is not the counsel of a powerless preacher, which if you overlook or ignore, will not bring any harm to you, but this is the edict of that owner of the universe, who is almighty, whose decrees cannot be withheld from being enforced by any power, and whose grasp cannot be avoided by anyone. The second attribute is meant to make one realize that it is all due to his kindness and mercy that he has sent his messenger for your guidance and instruction and sent down this great book so that you may avoid errors and follow the right path which may lead you to the successes of the world and the hereafter.
لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون.
So that you may warn a people whose ancestors were not warned before, wherefore they are heedless.
4. Another translation can be, you should warn the people of the same of which their forefathers had been warned, because they live in heedlessness. If the first meaning, as given above in the text, is taken, the forefathers would imply the forefathers of the immediate past, for in the ancient times several prophets had appeared in Arabia. And if the second meaning is adopted, it would imply this, revive and refresh the message that had been conveyed to the forefathers of this nation by the prophets in the past, for these people have forgotten it. Obviously, there is no contradiction between the two translations, and, as to meaning, each is correct in its own place. A doubt may rise here. How could the forefathers of a nation to whom no warner had been sent at a particular time in the past, be held responsible for their deviation at that time? The answer is, when Allah sends a prophet in the world, the influence of his message and teaching spreads far and wide, and is handed down by one generation to the other. As long as this influence remains and there continue arising among the followers of the Prophet such people as keep his message of guidance fresh, the period of time cannot be said to be without the guidance. And when the influence of the Prophet's teaching dies out, or the teaching is tampered with, the appointment of another Prophet becomes inevitable. Before the advent of the Prophet, peace be upon him, the influence of the teachings of the Prophets Abraham, Ishmael, Shuaib and Moses and Jesus, peace be upon all of them, could be seen everywhere in Arabia, and from time to time there had been arising among the Arabs, or coming from outside, men, who revived their teachings. When the influence was about to die out, and the real teaching was also distorted, Allah raised the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and made such arrangements that his message can neither be wiped out nor tampered with. For further explanation, see E.N. 5 of Surah Saba.
لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون.
Surely, most of them merit the decree of chastisement, so they do not believe.
5. This is about those people who were being obstinate and stubborn with regard to the message of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and had made up their minds not to listen to him at all. This is because they have already deserved the torment, therefore, they do not believe. It means, the people who do not heed the admonition, and persist in their denial and hostile attitude to the truth in spite of the final warning from Allah conveyed through the prophets, are themselves overwhelmed by the evil consequences of their misdeeds and deprived of every opportunity to believe. The same thing has been expressed more clearly in verse 11. Below you can only warn him who follows the admonition and fears the merciful God though he cannot see him.
So they do not believe.
This pertains to those who had become obstinate in regard to the Prophet's message and had made up their minds not to take heed of his teachings. As regards to them it is declared, surely most of them merit the decree of chastisement, so they do not believe.
إِنَّا جَعَلْنَا فِي أَعْنَاقِهِمْ أَغْلَالًا فَهِيَ إِلَى الْأَذْقَانِ فَهُمْ مُقْمَحُونَ.
We have put fetters around their necks, which reach up to their chins, so that they are standing with their heads upright.
6. Shackles in this verse implies their own stubbornness which was preventing them from accepting the truth. Reaching to chins, and so they are made stiff-necked, implies the stiffness of the neck which is caused by pride and haughtiness. Allah means to impress this. We have made their obstinacy and stubbornness the shackles of their neck, and their pride and haughtiness has made them so stiff-necked that they will not pay heed to any reality, however clear and evident it may be.
So that they are standing with their heads upright.
Fetters here signify the unbelievers' obduracy which prevented them from believing in the truth. Owing to the intensity of this obduracy, God has put fetters around their necks, so that they are standing with their heads upright. This refers to a stiffness of the neck that is caused by pride and arrogance.
وَجَعَلْنَا مِن بَيْنِ أَيْدِيهِمْ سَدًّا وَمِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ سَدًّا فَأَغْشَيْنَاهُمْ فَهُمْ لَا يُبْصِرُونَ.
And we have put a barrier before them, and a barrier behind them, and have covered them up, so they are unable to see.
7. Setting a barrier before them and a barrier behind them, means that the natural result of their stubbornness and pride is that they neither learn any lesson from their past history nor ever consider the consequences of the future. Their prejudices have so covered them from every side and their misconceptions have so blinded them that they cannot see even those glaring realities which are visible to every right-thinking and unbiased person.
So they are unable to see.
God has put a barrier before them and a barrier behind them. This means that the natural consequence of their stubbornness and pride was that they were incapable of learning any lesson from their history and were altogether disinclined to consider the results that would ensue from their attitude in the future. Their biases had covered them from all sides, and their misconceptions had so blinded them that they could not even see the glaring realities that were visible to every right-thinking and unbiased person.
وَسَوَاءٌ عَلَيْهِمْ أَأَنذَرْتَهُمْ أَمْ لَمْ تُنذِرْهُمْ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ.
It is all the same for them, whether you warn them or do not warn them, for they shall not believe.
8. This does not mean that it is futile to preach, but it means, your preaching reaches every kind of people. Some of them are the ones mentioned above, and some others those who are being mentioned in the next verse. When you come across the people of the first kind and you see that they continue to persist in their denial, pride and antagonism, you should leave them alone, but at the same time you should not feel disheartened so as to give up your mission, for you do not know exactly where among the multitudes of the people are those sincere servants of God, who would heed your admonition and fear God and turn to the right path. The real object of your preaching, therefore, should be to search out and collect this second kind of the people. You should ignore the stubborn people and gather this precious element of the society about you.
إِنَّمَا تُنذِرُ مَنِ اتَّبَعَ الذِّكْرَ وَخَشِيَ الرَّحْمَنَ بِالْغَيْبِ فَبَشِّرْهُ بِمَغْفِرَةٍ وَأَجْرٍ كَرِيمٍ.
You can warn only him who follows the admonition and fears the merciful Lord without seeing him. Give such a one good tidings of forgiveness and a generous reward.
إِنَّا نَحْنُ نُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى وَنَكْتُبُ مَا قَدَّمُوا وَآثَارَهُمْ وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين.
We shall surely raise the dead to life, and we record what they did, and the traces of their deeds that they have left behind. We have encompassed that in a clear book.
9. This shows that three kinds of the entries are made in the conduct book of men. First, whatever a person does, good or bad, is entered in the divine register. Second, whatever impressions a man makes on the objects of his environment and on the limbs of his own body itself, become recorded, and all these impressions will at one time become so conspicuous that man's own voice will become audible, and the whole history of his ideas and intentions and aims and objects and the pictures of all of his good and bad acts and deeds will appear before him. Third, whatever influences he has left behind of his good and bad actions on his future generation, on his society and on mankind as a whole, will go on being recorded in his account as far as they reach and as long as they remain active and operative. The full record of the good and bad training given by him to his children, the good or evil that he has spread in the society, and its impact on mankind as a whole, will go on being maintained till the time that it goes on producing good or evil results in the world.
واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون.
Recite to them, as a case in point, the story of the people of the town when the messengers came to them.
10. The early commentators, generally, have expressed the opinion that the habitation implies the Syrian city of Antioch, and the messengers mentioned here were the ones sent by the prophet Jesus for the preaching of his message there. Another thing that has been mentioned in this connection is that Antiochus was the king of this land at that time. But historically this story, which Ibn Abbas, Qatada, Ikrimah, Ka'b and Wajbi bin Munabi, and others have related on the basis of unauthentic Christian traditions, is baseless. There have been 13 kings of the Seleucid dynasty named Antiochus who reigned in Antioch, and the rule of the last king of this name, rather the rule of this dynasty itself, came to an end in 65 BC. At the time of the prophet Jesus, the whole land of Syria and Palestine, including Antioch, was under the Romans. Then, no proof is forthcoming from any authentic tradition of the Christians that the prophet Jesus might himself have sent any of his disciples to Antioch for preaching his message. On the contrary, the Acts of the Apostles, NT, shows that the Christian preachers had reached Antioch for the first time a few years after the event of the crucifixion. Now, evidently, the people who were neither appointed messengers by Allah nor sent by His messenger cannot be regarded as messengers of Allah by any interpretation, even if they might have traveled for the purpose of preaching of their own accord. Moreover, according to the Bible, Antioch was the first city where the non-Israelites embraced Christianity in large numbers and where the Christian faith met with great success, whereas the habitation mentioned by the Quran was some such habitation which rejected the invitation of the messengers, and was consequently punished with a divine torment. History also does not bear any evidence that Antioch was ever afflicted with a destruction, which might be regarded as the result of denying the prophethood. On account of these reasons, it cannot be accepted that the habitation implies Antioch. The habitation has neither been clearly determined in the Quran nor in any authentic hadith. The identity of the messengers also is not known through any authentic means nor the time when they were appointed. To understand the purpose for which the Quran is narrating this story here, it is not necessary to know the names of the habitation and the messengers. The object is to warn the Quraysh, as if to say, you are following the same path of stubbornness, prejudice and denial of the truth as had been followed by the people of that habitation, and are preparing yourselves to meet the same doom as was met by them.
إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون.
We sent to them 2 messengers, and they rejected both of them as liars. Then we strengthened them with a 3rd messenger. They said, we have been sent to you as messengers.
قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون.
The people of the town said, "You are only human beings like ourselves, and the merciful Lord has revealed nothing. You are simply lying."
قالوا رب
11. In other words, what they wanted to say was, since you are human beings, you cannot be the messengers of God. The same was the view of the disbelievers of Mecca. They also said, Muhammad cannot be a messenger because he is a man. They say, what sort of a messenger is he that he eats food and moves about in the streets? Surah Al-Furqan, Ayat 7, and the unjust people whisper to one another, saying, this man is no more than a human being like yourselves. What, will you then be enticed by this sorcery while you perceive it? Surah Al-Anbiya, Ayat 3, the Quran refutes this erroneous notion of the people of Mecca and says that it is not any new kind of ignorance which these people are displaying, but all the ignorant people since the earliest times have been involved in the misunderstanding that a human being cannot be a messenger and a messenger cannot be a human being. When the chiefs of the people of the Prophet Noah, peace be upon him, had rejected his prophethood, they had said the same thing, this person is no more than a human being like yourselves. By this he purely intends to obtain superiority over you. Had Allah willed, he would have sent down angels. Since the time of our forefathers we have never heard that a human being should come as a messenger. Surah Al-Mu'minun, Ayat 24, the people of Ad had said the same about the prophethood, peace be upon him. This person is no more than a human being like yourselves, for he eats of what you eat and drinks of what you drink. Now if you submit to a human being like yourselves, you will indeed be the losers. Surah Al-Mu'minun, Ayats 33 to 34, the people of Thamud also said the same about the Prophet Saleh, peace be upon him, shall we follow a man from among ourselves? Surah Al-Qamar, Ayat 24. And the same thing happened with almost every prophet that the disbelievers said, you are no more than a human being like ourselves, and the prophets always replied, it is true that we are no more than human beings like you, but Allah shows His favor to anyone of His servants He pleases. Surah Ibrahim, Ayats 10 to 11, then the Quran says that this very notion of ignorance has been preventing the people from accepting guidance in every age, and the same has been the cause of every nation's downfall. Has not the news reached to you of those who had disbelieved before this, and then tasted the evil results of their deeds? And in the hereafter there awaits them a painful torment. They deserved this fate because their messengers came to them with clear signs, but they said, shall human beings show us guidance? So they refused and turned away. Surah At-Taghaban, Ayats 5 to 6, whenever guidance came before the people, nothing prevented them from believing in it except this excuse, they said, has Allah sent a human being as His messenger? Surah Bani Israel, Ayat 94, then the Quran says explicitly that Allah has always sent human beings as the messengers and a human being alone can be a messenger for the guidance for mankind and not an angel, or a supernatural being, and we sent before you also human beings as messengers to whom we revealed our message. If you, O objectors, have no knowledge of this, you may ask those who have the knowledge. We did not give them such bodies as could survive without food, nor were they immortal. Surah Al-Anbiya, Ayats 7 to 8. All the messengers whom we sent before you also ate food and moved about in the streets. Surah Al-Furqan, Ayat 20. O Prophet, say to them, had angels settled on the earth and moved about in peace, we would certainly have sent an angel as a messenger to them. Surah Bani Israel, Ayat 95. 12. This is another notion of ignorance in which the disbelievers of Mecca were involved. In it are also involved the so-called rationalists of today, and in it have been involved the deniers of revelation and prophethood of every age since the earliest times. These people have held the view that Allah does not send down any revelation at all for the guidance of man. He is only concerned with the affairs of the heavens. He has left the affairs and problems of man to be resolved by man himself.